Welcome back to Making Money Matter, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Kerry Stevenson. I've asked Alex Dorsch, the Managing Director and CEO of Chalice Mining. You all know I've been a little bit busy. We've had the Gold Conference. I've been back to back because there was the Resources Rising Stars Conference up on the Gold Coast. I bumped into Alex there, but more importantly, I recently bumped into Alex at the Rick Rule Conference, which you all know I went to. And Rick liked the project so much, he invited Chalice to come over. And Rick and I have spoken a little bit. This is a big project, ladies and gentlemen. It's a PGE project. We're going to talk about what it is. The ASX code is CHN. Alex is the Managing Director and CEO. I know he doesn't look old enough to be that, but he is. Alex, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Kerry. Nice to talk to you.
First time on Making Money Matter. So I want to start off, if you like, because a lot of my viewers might not know a lot about Chalice. You've got the largest palladium nickel copper project, this is what you claim, in the Western world. I might challenge you on that one, but I want to just give a little bit of a brief background, and then we'll talk a little bit deeper if you like. So let's just do that to start with. Introduce your company to us.
Sure. So Chalice is ASX 300 company, established in 2006, really sort of rose to fame in 2020 when our geologists made the Gonville discovery here in WA. The discovery is only about an hour and 10-minute drive outside of Perth in Western Australia. It really captured a lot of attention from the industry and the market on that discovery. It was completely greenfield, sort of one of those fairy tale type stories. No evidence of mineralization anywhere near the area, and we were the first ones to drill, and it was a first hole discovery as well.
Wow.
So first drill hole hit high grade magmatic sulfides, nickel, copper, cobalt, palladium, and platinum. And over the space of the last 4 years or so, we've drilled out that discovery. We've spent about almost $200 million drilling it out, studying it, acquiring all the farmland which surrounds the discovery, and really sort of bringing it in readiness for development. And in parallel to that, we were lucky enough, because we were the first mover in the area, and we were the first ones to really make a decent discovery in the area. We were able to go and stake huge amounts of licenses in all directions as well. So we've got about 10,000 square kilometres under exploration license, and it's really now, we're in the midst of sort of trying to find the next one and looking sort of, across, all sorts of polymetallic mineral system styles, but, really in a very underappreciated and unloved sort of unexplored part of Western Australia. So it's an exciting company with a sort of two-part business. That obviously that development project, from based on that very unique palladium nickel copper discovery that we made. It's a very large discovery. It's a very, very significant sort of tier 1 scale resource. But we're also exploring sort of the surrounding area as well. So there's a lot of sort of upside, in the province as well.
I got so many questions, Alex. Where do I start? I'm sure some of my viewers out there are going, ask him this, ask him that. But let me start with the first one. You said that you've acquired the land. So does that mean you don't have any issues with landowners or anything like that? You can do what you want. It's all there. You own it. No problems.
Yeah, that's right. So we started buying the farmland in 2020, shortly after the discovery. So we executed about 15 transactions to buy what is now a 23 square kilometre land holding. So not only do we own the rights to all the minerals in the ground, but we actually hold the freehold title as well. So we are our own landlord. And we spent almost $50 million doing that, over a couple of years. And that really sort of de-risks a lot of the permitting. Obviously, it makes, land access a given, but it de-risks a lot of the permitting and some of the challenges that other projects have in the sort of wheat belt environment around accessing land. So that was a very wise decision to make, and we wanted to do that early before I guess you really sort of understand the full scale of the mineral system, and we are still, today, just grappling with the full scale of the mineral system we have there.
Well, I think that was genius, just quietly, because I know people have, sometimes land access can be one of the biggest challenges. So big tick, if that was your decision, bloody good decision. The other thing that you said was the first drill hole was the discovery drill hole. Alex Dorsch, what were you thinking at that time? Did you have any idea? Because it is all about discovery, but why the heck and how the heck did you think, oh, an hour outside of Perth, there's going to be this enormous mineralized system? Like, why that?
So the irony was we were exploring for gold actually over in Victoria at the time, and we hadn't even really sort of spent much time thinking about the prospectivity of the Julimar project, and which now hosts the Gonville discovery. But we've got a very, very talented group of geologists in Chalice that we've got very excited about the area and the potential for orthomagmatic sulfides. And they thought it was in the right sort of geological location. If you want to find sort of giant, nickel copper PGE systems, you go looking on the edges of Archean age cratons, so very, very old pieces of the Earth's crust. And the western edge of the Yilgarn just hadn't really been looked at, really by any, even after the nickel boom of the 1960s, 1970s, it had really not had a lot of attention. The western side of WA, all the nickel explorations really happened in the goldfields or, further north and out in places like the Fraser Range. So we really targeted the area from absolute scratch and drilled that very first hole. We'd spent only something like $70,000 to get to the discovery. So it was a very, very cost-effective discovery. And it's a reminder as well that, greenfield discovery can be a hugely, rewarding. Sometimes the risk reward for brownfield exploration is thought of to be better than greenfields, but we sort of demonstrated that you shouldn't discount greenfield exploration, and particularly in frontier areas where you're going.
Sorry to interrupt you, but some people go, "What do you mean greenfield, brownfield?"
Sure. So I mean, brownfield is like sort of looking for extensions to known, districts or provinces or deposits. Greenfields is really going into new areas that haven't been tested before, haven't been sort of even explained in terms of what makes the areas prospective. We were really testing an entirely new conceptual sort of thesis around prospectivity for magmatic sulfides along the western edge of the Yilgarn, and we were proven correct basically in the first drill hole. Greenfield, whilst it can appear that, sort of companies are sort of going into the abyss and, there's not a lot of evidence or data to prove the prospectivity, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not worth exploring. So as they say, the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, is Absolutely. The saying. So we really specialize in sort of going into frontier areas, like I think that, and we like to be the first ones on the ground, because typically the big sort of giant deposits are found by the first party because they are the most obvious sort of anomalies on the most obvious geophysical targets or geochemical targets. And now we're repeating that work, and we have been repeating that work, all the way along basically a 1,200 kilometre stretch of the western edge of the Yilgarn.
So I get it. So what I want to find out is, now I'm going to get into the capital structure and all that, because quite frankly, there was overexcitement earlier on, and things have been a little bit tricky. You've gone from sort of $10, and I think you're sitting at about $1 now. I'm going to get into that in a minute, but let's go to basics, if you like.
Yeah.
This is the largest palladium, nickel, copper. A lot of people don't understand palladium. Can we just talk palladium and why, as possible investors in your company, that's an important part? Because I think the palladium part of this project is going to account for about 50% of the revenue. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there's a really interesting history to palladium, and you probably need to go back to all the way back to about 2016 when Volkswagen cheated on the emissions testing in Europe. So what was called the Dieselgate scandal really sort of highlighted that diesels were nowhere near as efficient or environmentally friendly as what was claimed. And that caused the entire sort of auto industry to pivot towards petrol engines. And they've continued to pivot towards petrol engines. You just don't see a lot of passenger cars with diesel engines anymore. You still see, obviously, diesels in heavy transport, but predominantly smaller, internal combustion, engines or hybrid vehicles have petrol engines. And palladium and rhodium are the key metals within the exhaust systems of petrol engines. And they are incredibly important and unique metals in that within those exhaust systems, they facilitate basically, removing harmful pollutants, as well as sort of, they take out things like unburned hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide emissions, and they turn those emissions into more benign, basically gases. So they've, palladium in particular has gone from a relatively obscure metal 5 years ago. With that big push towards petrol engines, there was a real run up in the price, and that happened. That started really before COVID. So it started in that 2017 to 2020 period. The price went from about $1,000 an ounce to $2,500 an ounce. And then what happened sort of between COVID and 2022 is Russia, the biggest producer of palladium, they had two significant events. The first one was a big supply disruption at the Russian mine. There was a big flooding event which knocked out a big chunk of palladium supply, and these are sort of quite regular occurrences in that operation. They routinely have big, environmental, disasters, diesel spills. They have sort of whole buildings that collapse into the melting permafrost. They have like declines that flood. And so you get these regular sort of supply disruptions in palladium, and that actually sent the price to the record high of about $3,400 an ounce. So that was sort of in the context of what we'd found, which is the largest palladium deposit or largest palladium resource outside of Russia and South Africa. We found the deposit in a you could argue a very, very well-timed little moment. Obviously, we found it in 2020 when palladium was hitting all-time highs, and there was a huge amount of supply anxiety from the consumers of palladium, namely the auto sector, car companies. There was a huge amount of anxiety, and that was, sending the price into record territory. Unfortunately, since that high of $3,400 an ounce, the price has pulled all the way back to around $900 an ounce. And so Chalice's share price has been, very, very well correlated to that move on the spot market for palladium. And that coincided with our, the all-time high was, roughly coincided with our all-time high of $10.60 a share. And more recently, a low of sitting around the 90-cent mark. And palladium pulling back to, like I said, about $900 an ounce. So I think that's sort of one of the key sort of drivers, as you said. Palladium's going to make up 50% of the revenue stream from our project. So when the price has such volatile moves, even though we're not in production, it has huge impacts on the sentiment around the metal and the sentiment around investing in projects, particularly when there's a lot of supply anxiety that can bring in a lot of investment into new projects. And really sort of, was driving our share price to those highs. So I think it's been obviously a painful pullback for Chalice, sort of riding the metals price down, but it provides an opportunity for investors as well to ask themselves, is there going to be a repeat of that run up from 1,000 to 3,500. Because if you believe there is, then there's very, very few ways to actually get exposure to palladium in a safe jurisdiction. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about as well, because South Africa and Russia, they dominate. They've got about 85%, but you said that palladium is mainly used in petrol or hybrid.
Yeah.
But aren't governments around the world, not necessarily, ladies and gentlemen, not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing, but aren't we moving more towards electric vehicles? And does palladium play a role in EVs?
No, so yeah, it's a good point. So battery electric vehicles don't have an engine, obviously, so they don't need platinum or palladium or rhodium for the catalytic converter. And yeah, that was sort of became a bit ingrained into the thinking around the auto sector that there was going to be sort of exponential growth of battery electric vehicles. What's happened though in the last sort of 12 months or so is you've seen sort of a bit of a slowing of growth in battery electric vehicles, and you've seen an overwhelming sort of shift and a consumer pivot towards hybrid electric vehicles. So hybrids obviously have the engine, almost uniformly a petrol engine and a palladium-based catalyst, as well as the electric drivetrain and a smaller battery. So you've sort of got that real pivot at the moment sort of towards a hybrid or a transition technology. And I guess the question is, how long will it take for the sector to electrify? There are certain forecasters out there who maintain that it happens very, very quickly. And there are others who, I think are growing in their, their voices at the moment, who are saying this is going to happen much slower. And you need a combination of technologies. It's never a one size fits all. You can see that with pretty much everything in our daily lives. There's no one product, one size fits all. You need a range of solutions for different geographies, for different electricity, sort of price environments, for different lifestyles. If you live in the Nordic country with essentially free, clean hydropower, then it makes a lot of sense you buy a battery electric vehicle. But if you live in Asia or Australia, where you've got longer distances and you've got sort of more expensive electricity, then that differential is that price differential becomes important. So I think there's an ongoing debate in the industry about how quickly we electrify, but palladium is at an all-time sort of bearish sentiment because of that perception that we're immediately electrifying. And if you sort of have a zoom back on sort of what the trends show at the moment, it looks like palladium's going to be around for a lot longer than people think. And that can, for a sector that's starved of capital and is, entirely reliant on countries like Russia and South Africa to supply, that's where you can typically get very volatile sort of price behavior.
Yeah, and two questions from that. We all know that the challenges in Russia, there's challenges with South Africa. 85% palladium comes from there. Give me a time frame, because it's not going to happen tomorrow. We don't just turn on your mind. There's still a lot of work to be done. Just quickly tell me, if everything went according to plan, and we said before, you own the land, so that's a tick. How soon could you get into production? I don't want you to be too specific, but are we talking 10 years or what are we looking at?
Yeah, it's the latter part of the decade, basically. Yep. So typically it'll be the regulatory approvals and the permitting that governs the critical path to construct a mine. So we've begun that process. We've submitted, I guess, the referral, the initial step for permitting the project. And we've done a lot of the sort of engineering studies and metallurgical sort of work to design a flow sheet, but there's still quite a lot of that work to go. So by the end of the decade, we're aiming to be in production. So that's the sort of the rough time frame. And I guess the palladium market, it's very hard to predict where it's going to be in 3 months, let alone in 5 years. So that's one of the challenges.
Could you hazard a guess, Alex? Could you hazard a guess? I mean,
Oh, well, I think
you must be looking at it pretty closely. And I'm going to get onto nickel in a minute because I think that's about 25% of your project. You couldn't have picked two better commodities. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, this is when I think people now, not financial advice, do your own research, call up Chalice, ask all the questions that you think that I haven't asked. But I think this is, and Rick Rule says this often, and that's why I think that Rick wanted Chalice over at his symposium in Florida, because this is it's a big project. And as Rick often says, when no one else is watching, that's when you want to have a look. So,
yeah.
Alex, where was I going with that?
I think the point you were making was, contrarian sort of counter-cyclical investment is how you make real alpha or real returns in this sector. And I think, as I've said to Rick as well, and we've spoken about, when palladium and nickel are some of the most hated metals out there, that's typically when you look to accumulate exposure to those things because they're starved of capital. There's no new supply coming online. All the industry is shrinking right now. So South Africa is just one sort of mine shutting down after another at the moment.
Okay.
Something like half of the South African operations are loss making at the moment. Russia has a big, sanctions question mark over it. Russian palladium at the moment is one of the few unsanctioned, components of the Russian economy. Wow. Which is interesting from a geopolitical perspective. But, is there a point where we have to, as the Western world, sanction Russian metal or all Russian metal, including their palladium? So there's lots of, reasons why you could quickly see a recovery and a rebound of the palladium price in a very, very quick manner. And certainly if you look around, like how many palladium projects are around the world outside of Russia and South Africa, which are obviously very, very complex and difficult, jurisdictions to invest in. Yep. You really don't see many projects at all. And really our project being in Western Australia is an absolute standout in terms of scale and sort of, how advanced it is. And obviously where it is in terms of safe jurisdiction.
And is the government of Western Australia looking at this and saying, how can we help you? Because this is a big project. I think that it would have a lot of eyes on it, would it?
Yeah, exactly. Look, it requires a bit of vision and a bit of long-term, planning to bring a big polymetallic project like this. They don't happen quickly. It really is a joint, effort from ourselves, our partners, our service providers, the government. Everyone has to work together to build something. But once it is built, it's likely to be one of those intergenerational sort of assets that just goes on and produces, becomes a mine that our kids work at. It's really one of those very, very long life, large, scale resources projects. Doesn't look very obvious, when you find it, or doesn't look very obvious in a low metals price environment like where we are today. But it's certainly, one of those very, very attractive opportunities, to invest, for an investor who has a long-term, horizon.
And I think that's important. And look, we don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to just bring up the fact that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk who's involved as well. But, I think Paradise Investments, they've got about 5% of the company. Tim Goyder, ladies and gentlemen, Tim Goyder, he's a clever guy, got about 11%. And I think Hancock Prospecting, they quietly snuck in and got about 4.7%. But so it's not huge licks, but these are companies that are not stupid. Now, I guess they're looking at what you've got and saying, well, we want to make sure that we're properly positioned. And on top of that, you've done an MOU with Mitsubishi. Now, I'm assuming that MOU is to do with that sort of downstream, further down the track, because they're very good at marketing and that downstream element. Is that right?
Yeah, they're really, absolutely. They're one of the sort of top tier development partners. They are a classic foundational joint venture partner for a long life asset. They've, already involved in some of the biggest copper operations, anywhere in the world. They've got obviously some of the biggest metallurgical coal operations in the world. They are very, very good at getting in at the ground level and then sort of funding the project. And as you say, really providing an offtake channel and marketing the products. So really that's what we're working with them at the moment on is, how do we optimally produce, marketable products, and then what sort of payment terms will we likely get from those products? And then how can we bring sort of Japan Inc. to funding and financing of this project? So they are just an exceptional sort of mining investor, very, very long-term thinkers. So they're about sort of the best, possible, partner we could have asked for this project. And yeah, obviously we've got very, very good institutional investors on the register as well. It has been a very volatile ride for everyone. But, people who are involved with the company believe in the long-term thematic. They believe in the project. They also believe that, the exploration work we're doing is likely to ultimately come across, some other deposits in that huge land package we've got. So there's a huge amount of exploration upside there as well to get excited about.
So potentially more discovery.
Yeah, exactly. We just earlier in the week we talked about some very large, gold soil anomalies. We've got about 300 kilometers north of Gonville, the discovery. There's really potential in the West Yilgarn for anything. It is, just like everywhere in WA. It's a bit of a sort of a Goldilocks, bit of geology. In the Yilgarn Craton, it delivers, gold, copper, lithium, nickel, iron ore. So, we're exploring predominantly at the moment for copper gold, sort of orogenic, intrusive related hydrothermal copper gold systems. We've come across some very good gold targets already that we're going to be drilling very soon. So that's
my
good.
attention.
Exactly. But we've also got around 40 other sort of Gonville type magmatic targets as well that we're continuing to do work on. So there's a huge amount of, exploration, but it really is ground up sort of stuff. We're talking about 10,000 square kilometers that's never really been sampled before, never been flown with geophysics. So Chalice has been doing the groundwork in the background, getting ready for it, now a very exciting phase of drilling where you go around and test those new areas for the first time.
Capital structure, just quickly. I don't think you've got any debt. You've got quite a lot of cash because, people out there, I'm sitting here thinking this is a big project. It's a new discovery. As you said, greenfields before, lots of regional exploration. I need you to unpack it a little bit for us. And again, not financial advice, but really, do you think you've been oversold? Do you think people just went, we're out and it was oversold? I mean, I think people got overexcited when it got to $10.60, quite frankly. But I think that now it's potentially been oversold because you've got no debt, you've got cash in the bank. So can you just give us a little bit of the capital structure?
Yeah, so enterprise value today around 300 million plus the 110 million in cash and listed investments that we hold. So around 90 million of that is cash. So we've got enough cash to last, years and years and years. There is no risk of dilution to holders. So whilst metals price environment is weak, we've been very, very careful with what we spend money on to make sure that we retain that strong financial position. And if you put it in the context of we've spent almost $200 million discovering Gonville, drilling it out, acquiring the farmland. And then for $200 million, currently an enterprise value of 300 million, you get exposure to that project as well as all the surrounding license holdings. So yeah, I think, and our share price, as you've seen, probably, is sort of, bouncing around the $1 a share level. So it feels like, that to us, reflects sort of where we are in the metals price cycle. But if you have that long-term horizon as an investor, I think there's a very, very compelling, opportunity there, and it is at a value point that, it provides a compelling opportunity to a new investor.
This is the first time it's been a bit of a longer conversation because it's the first time you've been on Making Money Matter, Alex, and I really appreciate your time. But my guests know that I always like to finish up with, give me 3 reasons only, not 5, 3 reasons you think that right now is a good time for them to sit up and take notice of Chalice Mining.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kerry. I think, look, number one is the uniqueness of our palladium exposure. No one else has palladium. No one else can give you palladium exposure. And like we've said, it's a very, very, interesting metal right now. The strong financial position. There's not a lot of juniors with 110 million in cash and listed investments who have the longevity to keep going. And then number three, that exploration upside, like the frontier exploration, new areas, totally unexplored, a team that's really, the Chalice team has proven itself that we can find, these discoveries. So I think those three things really make it a very unique opportunity.
And ladies and gentlemen, you all know, I always say it, people and projects. I like the people, I like the project. That's why I wanted to get him on, for you guys to make up your own decision. But as I said at the start, this is the largest palladium nickel copper project in the Western world, in a great jurisdiction. Hedley Woodard recently said that he's just looking at Australia. This is in Western Australia. Good capital structure, no debt. Do your own research. ASX code is CHN, but I'll get Alex back again in a couple of months and we'll keep bringing you updates as we go throughout the year. But for now, Alex Dorsch, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Kerry. Pleasure.